What up, mans? It's Taco Mans. Today I'm doing some routine maintenance by changing the spark plugs on my Toyota Tacoma. Let's taco about it. If you're wondering whether or not you need to change your spark plugs and how to do that, you're in the right place. A few reasons why you might need new spark plugs are 1. Your engine's misfiring, 2. The engine has a rough idle, 3. You're not getting great gas mileage, or 4. The gas pedal is not as responsive as it used to be. For my taco, I have a bit of all these issues except for the engine misfiring. On top of that, I've owned the truck for almost 2 years and don't know the maintenance history before that, so it's most likely overdue. The tools you'll need for this job are a 3/8 ratchet, an optional impact wrench, a 5/8 spark plug socket which has the rubber gasket to hold the spark plug, a 10mm socket for the engine cover and ignition coil bolts, a 12mm socket for the bracket on the driver's side, a Phillips screwdriver for the airbox, a couple flatheads to remove the switches, a socket extension for hard to reach places, some liquid wrench or PB blaster, and a low end torque wrench if you have it, which I don't. Now, I wasn't expecting to need a car jack, but I actually used one for this job, and you'll find out why later. Then you need your actual spark plugs. I picked up OEM DENSO spark plugs from Toyota. I added the part number below so you can reference it later. Now, there's a lot of debate online on what spark plugs to use, but I'm not going to go over that. The sole reason I picked these is because it's what Toyota recommends. The other recommendation being NGK, which I also noted in the description. Another optional tool is this gap opener. The spark plugs should come gapped correctly, but I checked them anyways. The required factory spec is between 0.039 and 0.043 inches, and all of them came out to within spec. So I started the job by removing the two 10mm bolts holding the engine cover. The driver's side is the tougher side. The 3 ignition coils are visible, but there's a lot of stuff in the way. I removed the switches for the first 2 that I could reach. A little hook tool would have been more useful, but I made it work with a couple flathead screwdrivers. This metal bracket and hose for the PCV valve are in the way of removing the middle ignition coil. The bracket is secured by 2 12mm bolts, one at the top and one way down at the bottom. I planned to remove the top bolt and loosen the bottom so I could swivel the bracket out of the way, but the bottom bolt was so rusted it began to round off. After some thinking, I decided to jack up the front end to remove the driver's side tire. This gave me better access so I could try and remove the bolt without stripping it. After spraying it with liquid wrench a few times and letting it sit for 15 minutes, I used my 20-inch extension through the wheel well and was able to get it out. Instead of just loosening it, I took it off completely to inspect it. So as you can see, the top one is perfect, and the bottom one is kinda moshed up, but it's still usable. Now the bracket's gone and I removed the PCV valve hose out of the way, which came from here. Now I was able to access the ignition coil bolts, so I hit them all with a bit of liquid wrench and was able to carefully remove them. Because of the difficult angles, I removed the other 2 off camera. I inspected all of them to make sure they all had their rubber gaskets intact. Again, I sprayed more liquid wrench on all the spark plugs, let it sit for a few minutes, then began removing them using my spark plug socket and extension bar. The old spark plugs are looking pretty rough. I noticed that they're the same NGK spark plugs that Toyota recommends, so it's possible they've never been changed. I was curious what the gap was, and I was surprised that they were all around 0.068 inches. Compared to the new one, it's clear the gap is too wide and the electrode is worn out. To install the new plugs, I used the same tools but without a ratchet at first. To avoid cross-threading, I turned the spark plug counterclockwise for a bit until I felt it click, then clockwise. Everything is done by hand until it bottoms out, then I use the wrench. The torque value for this plug is 18 foot-pounds. Since I don't have a low-end torque wrench, I did it by feel, snugged it up, and gave it a half turn. I did the same thing for the other 2 spark plugs and then I moved on to the ignition coils. Just making sure again they all had rubber gaskets, I wiggled them in and installed the bolts. I was running out of sunlight, so I finished up the driver's side off camera. Just remember to plug in all the switches and snug up the 10mm ignition coil bolts to 7 foot-pounds. Then I reinstalled the bracket and hose from the PCV valve. I cleaned up the rusty bolt and used it at the top so it would be easier to remove again if needed, and the nicer bolt went to the bottom. The driver's side is done, let's move on to the passenger side. To access the ignition coils and spark plugs on the passenger side, all we need to do is remove the air filter box. I used a Phillips head screwdriver to loosen up the clamp connecting the air intake to the filter. Then there's 2 clips holding the air filter in place. The whole thing can be removed, and now there's clear access to all 3 ignition coils. Let's speed through removing these spark plugs. It's basically a repetition of what I did on the driver's side, but this side's so much easier and quicker. Now I don't know about you, but when I need informational DIY videos, I'm usually in the middle of the job and need information right away. That concept basically shapes how I make these videos. So if you're finding this video helpful, please consider liking or subscribing if you want to see more 2nd gen taco DIY vids. Alright, after getting these 3 spark plugs out, I noticed they were DENSO, the exact same as the ones I'm installing. This is how I confirmed they've never been changed, because when Toyota released these trucks, they would infamously have 3 DENSO and 3 NGK spark plugs out of the factory. I'm not really sure why, but I'm happy to know that I have newer ones now after 11 years. So I installed these 3 new spark plugs the same way as before. I torqued them down to about 18 foot-pounds by hand, then installed the ignition coils. The 10mm bolts are 7 foot-pounds, and don't forget to plug the switches back in. Then I reinstalled the air filter box the same way I removed it, reinstalled the air intake hose, and tightened the clamp with the screwdriver. Then I put the engine cover back on, snugged the 10mm bolts, which don't need much torque at all, and there's nothing left other than to start up the truck. I can tell you just by listening, the engine is already quieter. It's been a week since I've done this job, and it's been driving a lot more snappy. The 11-year-old spark plugs were definitely overdue. How long have you gone without changing your spark plugs? Let me know in the comments. I'm planning to clean the MAF sensor and throttle body to keep improving the engine, which will be in an upcoming video, so look out for that. Please like, share, subscribe, and vibe. I'll catch you on the next Taco Man's out. Peace.